Hello, everybody. You're most welcome. We're just going to let everybody file in, um, and then we'll start in probably about 60 seconds. Okay. Okay. I'm going to start. Hello, and welcome to our fourth in our series of online seminars from XR Network Plus, exploring different aspects of virtual production and XR technologies through the eyes of some of the projects that we've funded through XR Network Plus. My name is John Rose Adams. I'm the R&D manager for the network. And today we're going to focus on sound design for VP and XR context. And we're delighted to welcome Edinburgh Napier University and the Autonomy to the party. And we've also got a slightly different format for today. So normally you just get me and doing the kind of like the anchor person thing. But today we're going to welcome Helena Daffern, now professor in music technology at the University of York. And Helena is joining us to guest host the seminar. And we've also invited Helena to do a little extra piece for us at the end, which I'm tentatively, and it's not so tentative because I put it on the slide, calling the magical XR tour bus. But what we've asked Ellen to do is to share some of her thoughts around some of the most interesting research and R&D that's being done around sound in VP and XR context at the moment, drawing from examples from outside of the network. Quick little note on the Zoom webinar format. So we have got time for comments and questions after the talk set aside. So please pop any questions as you think of them in the Q&A box, and then we'll work our way through them when we get to the questions. If you've been to one of our seminars before, you'll already know what XR Network Plus is, but it is and the full name, XR Network Plus Virtual Production in the Digital Economy. It's an EPSRC funded program, and it is a multi-year program that seeks to develop the agenda and direction for UK research in virtual production and next-gen convergent media. So it's a program of funding, support, connection, dissemination for researchers and industry partners working across the evolving ecosystem of virtual production technologies. And it is led by the University of York in collaboration with the University of Edinburgh, University of Arts London, Cardiff University and Ulster University. And you're all most welcome. I'm going to pop back at the end with my parish notices, but for now, I'm going to hand over to Professor Helena Daffern. Take it away, Helena.
Thanks, John, and thank you for inviting me to chair this session. I'm really excited to hear about the project. And just to maximise the time they have to talk about their project, I won't spend too long on introductions, but just to hand over, we're delighted that we've got Balandino Di Donato, lecturer in interactive audio from Edinburgh Napier University, alongside Martin Riga, who is a freelance audio producer from VR Tonum. And they're going to share. I've been practicing saying that, and Martin, I think if I hadn't stumbled, I'd have got away with it. And we're delighted to hear more about their project, which is about sound design in VR in VP production. So I'll leave you to take it away. Thank you.
Yes, so I'll share my screen. Share sound. And this should be okay. Funny. Apologies.
We can see your slides. We can't hear you, but I think you're muted. Yeah, it looks like
Still muted.
Yeah, it looks like it's on mute, Valentina. I have to say, audio people, we don't like doing presentations that involve involve webinars or Zoom, and we have no control of our audio at all. No, it still looks muted.
No.
Are you locally muted?
Oh,
There you
now
go.
can
There
you
you
hear me? Oh, sorry, guys.
There we go.
Good start to be an audio presentation. I'm not sure what has happened. Zoom seemed to have frozen for a second. So I'm Valandino from Edinburgh Napier University, and there is with me Martin, and he's from Viertung, and there is also Ian McGregor that collaborated on the project with us. So this project basically looked at 360 immersive experience and how they are exploited in different sectors. And talking to Martin, who is our industrial partner, he together we looked at the fact that in different sectors, whether it's in advertisement, social media, or even sectors like real estate, 360, and is really exploited in different formats and different devices. And these all platforms, they all deliver 360 experience in different ways. And although there are very established tools for the visual medium, for cropping the images and for sharing visual content, it's not exactly the same for when it comes to the sound design production, where things are very much manual and less automated, which is a kind of an issue between quotation marks that slows down the workflow of a sound designer and so the whole production chain. So one of the issues is going from something like this, which is a 360 image. Okay, this is the unwrapped version of unrolled version of a 360 image, to then go to something like this, which is instead is a 6:9, let's say, version of a cropped version of a 360 of a rendered 360 video. So as I said, there are loads of tools to go from here to there. However, there are still very, very limited tools to automate the process and to in the auditory for the sound design production. So our aims were to start establishing a prototype pipeline to automate this process. So what we did together with Martin is to take a couple of videos and to refine the content to a 1-minute version of the video content that we had originally, and to create two versions, a 360 version and a 6:9 version of these videos, and then to do 3 different mixing. So we did a mix for 360 experiences, interactive experiences, one for 2D, so 6:9 versions of the video, one mixed in 2 different versions of binaural. Okay, so we had 2 binaural mixes and 1 360 mix, which basically was an ambisonic recording, really. After we did that, we did run a listening study here at Edinburgh Napier to ask people about differences between the videos, preferences, and the role of sound design within those videos. And then we conducted these listening studies in the realization suite here at Edinburgh Napier. So the videos that we chose were two, and we show you one of these now. And this is as an example, and this is the video. I hope the audio will be fine.
The buildings are all built on posts, on big posts, like you see here everywhere. So we are right now sitting at the biggest lake in Southeast Asia.
So this was this 360 video, of course, is the unwrapped version, but it was the way we participants in the listening evaluation looked at it. It was using an iPhone, and they had the possibility to interact with the video. So they will move the mobile phone and listen to the sound changes, and the video will rotate as well, and so on. And this instead is the 16:9 version of that 360 video.
The buildings are all built on posts, on big posts, like you see here everywhere. So we are right now sitting at the biggest lake in Southeast Asia.
Okay. So now I give the words to Martin that will talk about the workflow that he went through in the designing of the sound design of these two videos.
Perfect. Let me jump in. Hi, I hope you can hear me. Zoom just crashed massively, so I had to switch to my phone, but it looks like I'm still there, off to a wild start. Hi, yeah, I'm doing sound for 360 videos for over 8 years now, and still I find those very fascinating, and I feel like they never really got to a level where I'm like, hey, this can be cool content for social media even. I feel like it's still a very tiny niche, but still I see a lot of relevance with a lot of influencers filming themselves with 360 cameras and then using this footage to crop it down to even 16:9 or 9:16 videos. So long story short, for this process, there's currently not a pipeline for sound. So you can easily use a 360 video, crop it down to whatever format you want to have for TikTok, for YouTube. But this does not apply for spatial audio. So you would be thinking, when I do the rotation and do the cropping, I can use a tool and it automatically adjusts the sound depending on where you are looking at with your cropped down version, or the reframing is what's the term. So what I had to do is take a step one, take a 360 video with ambisonics. This was what Valentino just showed us. And I had to shorten it obviously to a desirable length of 1 minute that we can test it with the audience. Then step two was to convert it to from the equi-rectangular view to the 16:9 projection, just as you saw that I added keyframes to do the rotation, that you can move around without a 360 video. So you can use it for short format content, as I mentioned, like on YouTube, for example, or on a Zoom call. And yeah, then I had to repeat the whole workflow because there's currently not a way to combine the video reframing with the audio reframing. So I basically had to do everything manually, and we will just go step by step what nice work this is, which is 100% manually. And I feel like there should be a solution. So this is what we try to find out. Does it make sense? Will the people understand and hear any difference in what we are doing? So the end result is a 16:9 video with binaural sound that adapts to what you are looking at, depending on what the frame tells you. Right? So, Valentino, long story short, next slide. Thank you very much. This process was, you would be thinking, very simple, to just use a 360 video and then cut it down. But as you can tell, that's not how it works. So if we, this is just a screenshot from Premiere Pro, the normal editing software that most of the people are using, but it doesn't really handle multi-channel audio like ambisonics. So I had to use a workaround, which we can see on the next slide. Thank you. If you want to work with multi-channel audio in Premiere Pro, you have to use this weird metrics to support higher order ambisonics, which is 16 channels of audio. And you can guess then that the timeline adds up pretty quickly, and Premiere Pro has a chance to messing up any channels, and this is certainly what you don't want to have with ambisonics. You want to have your 16 channels of audio and just cut them. But just cutting the audio was already a painful work, so I basically had to do everything in Reaper, which we can see in the next slide, which is technically an audio workstation, a digital audio workstation. But suddenly I had to import the video into Reaper. I had to import the audio into Reaper. I mean, you could hear in the example, there are sound effects, there is dialogue, and I wanted to maintain those with stems, so like the single tracks, and so I can create a better mix. If I just use the final mix where everything like the music is already embedded, I can hardly cut out any scenes, otherwise the music will jump, and this is not what we wanted for our experience. So you can guess a lot of steps involved to just cutting down a video and maintaining multi-channel audio. So in the end, I had a 1 minute of ambisonics audio and 1 minute of 360 video that we can go into the next step. Yes, this was the export, and this is a step I would have wanted to avoid, because you have a 360 video with the best possible quality that you can watch on a VR headset. But with this process, I couldn't just cut out the beginning and the end and maintain the quality. I had to do a re-render. And as you know, if you export something twice and re-import it and then export it again with without lossless video settings, you will lose resolution. But if you keep the bit rate here, for example, if you keep it high, you won't lose as much quality. But this is a step we had to do because there's currently not really a workaround for that. So let's go to the next slide and do the actual reframing. So we here see a 360 video, which is like this distorted view to project a sphere onto a video so that we can work with it in the context of normal video editing softwares. And then we have the crop down version, which is the other video that you just saw. So how did we do that? We can see in the next slide, thank you, that there is software like Insta360 Studio or this GoPro FX Reframe. The first software is basically a piece of software that comes with your 360 camera, and this is what all the influencers are using right now. So basically you take a 360 video and then use the Insta360 Studio, and it automatically converts the 360 video into 16:9 content or even square, whatever you want to do. But the problem is that with the export I did from Reaper, Insta360 wouldn't recognize it as a 360 video anymore because I lost all the metadata, which told the software, hey, this is a 360 video. So I couldn't work with that. So in the next slide, we see what I had to do. I basically, I could thank you for jumping in. I already told that, and go into Premiere. So back into Premiere Pro and use this GoPro FX plugin. And as you can see, you can set your keyframes, like how big the sphere is and what field of view you are using. So I could do all the reframing process manually in Premiere Pro. So let's go to the next step. Now I had a 360 video that was reframed, so it was now a 16:9 video, and now basically I had to manually recreate every step, every keyframe that I was currently just manipulating in Premiere Pro, and had to use the same automations and all the same keyframes in Reaper. And this is what you see right here. This is basically an ambisonics plugin which rotates the sphere, for example, in any direction, and also does a binaural downmix. I'm not sure if everybody knows what that means, but basically it takes those 16 tracks of ambisonics and converts it to 2 channels of stereo, which we can use for YouTube. So let's go to the next slide. This was as you can tell, a fun work, because the plugins, they have different parameters. As you can see right here, like one of the ambisonics plugins, it goes from -180 to +180, so that you know, okay, in the front is 0, and then in the back we have -180. But the other plugin I used in Premiere earlier, it even allowed the values of -360 or even -720. So you can guess those numbers don't really add up. And so a lot of thinking, like, how am I even rotating the scene? So another problem I encountered here. Next slide, please. So long story, after a lot of manual work, I basically exported the sound as stereo, and then I had the perfect soundtrack for my 16:9 video that would also rotate the sound as I see the rotation, for example, in the video. But yeah, here are some of the plugins I use, but I'm not sure like how relevant this is for now. But you can ask any questions later on. So let's go to the next slide.
This was the last one, I guess.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Yeah,
so I'm done.
Yeah.
No, that's all right. Yeah, that's because we're done. Go ahead.
Yeah, then I'll give it back to you the words at the end, Martin. But yeah, now I'll take it back again, because after Martin has done all this very laborious work and produced the videos, we did the listening evaluations. Basically, we asked participants to watch the video using these videos using a pair of headphones and watching the video on an iPhone, like in a kind of, we were aiming to recreate a more standard, let's say, scenario, a common scenario that of someone watching a 360 video using a mobile phone. So we had a number of 21 participants. We are still collecting data for the time being, so we are this number might grow in the future because we want to hear more and more about it. But for the time being, we had 21 participants with a median age of 34 years old. 14% had mild hearing loss, and 53% were audio professionals. And the gender split was 71% males and 29% females. We asked them to tell us about which was their favorite video, and interestingly, well, not interestingly, it was kind of expected at the beginning that they had they favorited these 360 videos, unless the 2D videos, which has been the case. But at the same time, when we asked them to rate the videos individually, they all gave quite high rating to all videos. We then asked them to tell us the reasoning for why they gave those ratings and why that was their favorite videos. And in their comments, they mentioned clarity and well-mixed sound design overall for all videos. They appreciated the experience without of the sound design without distracting the visual experience. And many mentioned the feeling of immersions, and sound had a significant contribution to this feeling of being within the video environment. And sound directionality and synchronization resulted being very important factors. With this, I mean the synchronization. So, for example, when the video would rotate of a person rotating the mobile phone, and the sound directionality changing accordingly. Then they commented on the positioning of the sound design sources in this 3D space, which helped to give a very good sense of realism. And they kind of appreciated a variety in the sound design and the soundscape diversity, okay, with participants favoring more eventful auditory experience. So in particular about these 360 videos, they were particularly more attentive to more careful in spotting potential mismatch in the sound directionality, perhaps that was given by the interactive experience, the agency that they had to actually interact with the video and the sound. And they felt a bit more distracted though, and they were a bit more disoriented by the screen, and also some commented on the size of the video. Perhaps they commented on the potential of having a bigger screen, for example, like on an iPad or a bigger device. They contributed. They answered positively about the spatial sound contributing to the immersion, and again, that some kind of concerns about the potential, the directionality of the sound compared to the sound matching the audio and video elements. About the 2D videos, they had very positive remarks compare synchronization way much more than in the 360 videos, which was quite interesting because in the 360 videos we had an ambisonic recording that it was accurate a very accurate representation of the space. Instead, in this case, we had a more rendered, a more artificial way, let's say a more artificial mixing, or a more artificial mixing, and they appreciated consistencies across the 2D videos in the approach of sound spatialization, and some they communicated preference for 360 videos as being as giving more agency to the viewer, and then providing interactivity, and that had an impact on the feeling of immersion somehow. And some commented on the con side, some commented on the distortion of the fisheye effect of when cropping a 360 video. Some spotted on that. And yeah, as a last point, as I said before, many preferred to have this 360 video because they had freedom of movement within during the experience. So yeah, this is what they said in very, very short, in a nutshell. And these are some potential solutions that we individuated with Martin, and I'll give it back the word to you, Martin.
Thank you very much, Balandino. Yeah, there are multiple solutions that could work out here. The first one is embedding the audio mixing features into the Insta360 Studio software. I mean, it makes so much sense. You do the adjustments for the video, and you does automatically the adjustments for the sound. So this would save so much time, but it's not a thing at the moment because it doesn't understand what Ambisonics is. And the team, it does build microphones into the cameras and pretend that they support Ambisonics. But as you can tell, cameras don't really have good microphones. So you have to have a decently mixed soundtrack already before doing this reframing. So that would be the solution number one. Number two would be, it would be great if I had a plugin inside of Premiere that is somehow linked to my reframing plugin that basically does the same rotation, but for the sound. So basically 2 plugins being linked at the same time, doing the same thing. And I would be so happy. And the third solution would be a software pipeline reading automation data from Premiere plugin that feeds into the automation data of a digital audio workstation. Because as you could tell, I used software that wasn't really supposed to be doing that. Like I used Reaper to cut videos and I used Premiere to cut audio. Doesn't really make sense, right? So you would want to have, as an audio engineer, to do your audio mixing inside of a digital audio workstation. So it would be great if you could export the keyframes from Premiere and import the keyframes somehow into Pro Tools, so you could still do your adjustments just like a normal audio engineer wants to do. So that would be 3 potential solutions. And I think I give it back to you, Balandino.
Yeah, I mean, not much more to say, really.
That's it.
If not, thank you to everyone. And this was in a nutshell the work, but we appreciate any questions. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Balandino and Martin, for that fascinating presentation. If nothing else, have you highlighted, please can we start paying more attention to the audio workflows involved in virtual production? And that would be nice, wouldn't it? So it's everybody on this webinar, it's your turn to ask some questions. So please feel free to tap in questions into the question and answer. And I will do my best to manage the technology and see what they are, and I will pass them forward. While you're busy typing, I've got a first question. You mentioned, so you talked quite a lot about automation and the lack of it at the moment. Aside from how difficult would that actually be, I was curious as to the extent to which you implemented a creative process in the outputs that you had for your 2D representations. So how much decision making was there from a creative point of view, as opposed to the expectation that we have a ground truth of 360 soundscape that we then want to manipulate into a new kind of frame, as it were?
Yeah. Let me jump in, I guess that's my part. There's a lot of thought actually that went into how do I reframe the 360 video. If we start like the very first scene, there's like a motorcycle driving by. And if I reframed it by following the motorcycle, it would be a boring sound experience because then the sound would always be coming from the front. And this is just not fun. You want to have like some drive-by. So this is exactly why the motorcycle starts at the left, and you do have some panning because movement is always interesting for the human eye, but then it pans out to the right. But then I even made more because I wanted the people to also see, oh, we're standing on a bridge and maybe have a look to the city. So we would hear the motorcycle on the left again. So honestly, for every scene, I figured what would be interesting to see and to hear. And I know there are now like AI recommendations even in the Insta software where you basically just press, hey, do your thing, and it automatically tries to reframe your video. And most of the time it does something very nice because it does a lot of rotation that manually takes a lot of time. But as you can tell, sometimes it just doesn't understand what the scene is about and moves away when something exciting is happening. So I hope this answers your question.
Absolutely, it does. It also then brings up the question of, if you automated that, you kind of want a new tool, don't you, as a creative, to be able to not just manage your mix, but to maybe change like the way that you deal with objects in it. I don't know. I can see lots of legs to it.
Yeah, we already have a lot, but it's just missing a little connection. And this is basically just the connection between video and sound. I feel for sound, we already have a lot of for video, we already have a lot of possibilities to tweak something, and for sound as well, but not in the in the mix. And this is what we found out.
Absolutely. Thank you. Right, we have our first question from Yash, and that is, would it have been possible to map the videos onto a VR headset, such as an Oculus or Pico, for a more immersive experience? Had it been done on a VR headset, could the video data automation be used to automate the audio parameters?
Yes, I thought about that, and that's what I do for my clients. If I want to give them a quick preview, I jump into the VR headset, do a screen capture, and then use the screen capture to show them on a 2D screen like what's happening. And yes, it's a good point. You could capture the data, but the problem with this is then the capturing becomes basically a performance where you have to watch everything at the right time for 1 minute straight, and it has to be the perfect take. Otherwise, you would still end up tweaking those keyframes that you have to tweak anyways. And also, what I can't do with a VR headset is change the field of view. It always has the same field of view, but what I did here sometimes is zoom a little bit in or sometimes zoom out if it fits to the scene, and this is what I can't do with a VR headset. But yeah, that's also what I thought about.
Yeah, if I can pop in as well, I mean, what you could do with a VR headset, for example, you could also do automation or simulate it in a game engine, for example, in Unity or something. You could automate camera movements, and if you have ambisonic recordings, for example, attached to the camera position, then you would have also a rendering of the audio. But still there you would have, as Martin also highlighted, you would have, I guess, quite a lot of video limitations. So you don't have as much as flexibility as in a video editor. But yeah, it's possible, and video engines are incredibly powerful. And yeah, perhaps we did not explore much further the option of audio game engines, but probably there is something there to be explored as well in the future. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And thank you for that question. Any further questions? We have got a few more minutes if anyone does have another question. Otherwise, I'm going to just keep talking and asking my questions that I find interesting. But I think because I think there's a lot that we could delve into here. And I think so. One of the things that really struck me when you went through the process, Martin, was the number of times you had to go in and out of different pieces of software. And so just to dig into the automation a little bit more, and do you think having been through that process, aside from implementing within Insta360 the audio as a kind of fully automated tool, looking back, do you think you could have done it in a simpler map? Or was it the most efficient way that you could have done it, considering it was the first time you'd tried?
I think it's always a question of how happy, like what's your expectation of quality? Because as mentioned, you could just do it in 1 minute by screen capturing a VR headset and say, hey, now that's the experience. But for me as a content creator, obviously I want to have the best possible 2D experience when I have a cool 360 video that's already from a visual side done good. For the audio side, the soundtrack was already done. So how can I take advantage of that and maximize the effort? So yes, it could have been done quicker with a dirty workaround, but for everything to maintain the quality that I expect, even as a viewer, I'm not sure if how I could have done this quicker. Maybe do everything inside of Reaper and even ignore Premiere and stay in one engine. But this obviously also had some backlashes. So no, I don't think there's a better way. And the question that we asked ourselves was, is it worth the effort? This is basically what I wanted to find out. Like, do people even hear that there is a difference? And Balandino, correct me, but this is what I asked you a few days ago. Like, now did we learn something? Like, now do people realize it? And from what we see is that people surprisingly listened close to the 2D version, like even more than the 360 version, which was surprising for me because the 360 works nice, but for 2D it still worked better, sort of, for some of the people. But feel free to jump in.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're completely right. And in this 360 version, there is a lot of bias that we noticed in the use of the technology and the interactivity. But in the 2D versions, they work incredibly nice, and they work, and there is just that expectation of interaction and sense of agency to bring someone inside the virtual world, let's say, or the video somehow. So yeah.
Great. We have a couple more questions in, which I think we can probably get them both in. So the first one's from Ben, which is, would AI work to analyze the video, then base audio panning on the movement of the objects?
I think long term, yes. I mean, I have strong hopes that AI can save a lot of time. And as I mentioned, there already is some sort of intelligent auto reframing tool inside of the software. And if it would do the same thing for the sound, I would be happy. But as I just mentioned, sometimes it doesn't really cut it. I feel always like AI can save you a lot of time to a certain point, and then you still have to do some manual tweaking. So I guess we are not replaceable yet, but quicker, I guess. So I see that being a thing in the future, definitely.
Yeah, if I can jump in as well. It's not related to sound specialization per se, but there is work using AI and there are different type of models, especially in the field of Foley audio, when people use video analysis to synchronize sounds, so the localize certain events that have happened in the video, and then apply, for example, footsteps or voice or sounds to that particular image. So perhaps something like that could be adapted at some point, but it's technology that research there is still quite experimental, from my understanding.
Yeah. I currently test a video or like an image to sound generator, and it's early as you can guess. And then doing this for 360 videos, like with spatialized sound, is still something so specific, like just like this use case, that people don't really jump onto that, which is somehow a shame, I think, because there would be a lot of potential.
And it also relates back to that first question of creativity, doesn't it? And you don't always want it, there's a real nuance that I guess we don't really understand of, you don't always want your audio to match your visual. It depends on what story or what experience you want people to have. And that can be the power of sound, can't it? In those situations that you can generate something that you can't see, that you can implicate or, change the impression of a visual image through sound in a subtle way that hopefully AI can't quite grasp yet, not least because we can't quite grasp it yet. So that's where the creative comes in there, which is a really interesting thing to explore in more detail, I think, and more depth. Another question we have from Mesa, sorry if I'm pronouncing all these names wrong. What solution do you recommend for a VP supervisor who wants to use audio on a VP stage? Use the sound on the wall? That's a really interesting question, because it throws up a whole another set of problems. So go on, I'm interested.
Okay, I do have some knowledge about VP. I already thought about that. Yeah, I mean, you film with a normal camera and the background is already rendered in a an Unreal Engine, for instance, and I also thought about it would make sense to also put the sound into Unreal Engine so that you would record the sound already on set. But the problem is that most of the time, those facilities that I visited that do have a VP a setup, they sound like very roomy. They again, they forgot about sound. It looks great, but it sounds just like a swimming hole, for example, like a lot of reverb. And then you would have to, I don't know, add loudspeakers to capture the sound. And for sound, it's most of the time easier to capture something as isolated as possible. This is still where most of the time people end up recording something in the studio, and then add back in the background ambience, the noise, the Foley, the music and whatnot, which gives you a soundtrack. But honestly, I'm not a fan of that. I really like to go out. Like everything you heard was recorded in Vietnam, or Cambodia was it actually, and it just feels natural. And recreating that in a game engine, I find very difficult. But I could be biased since I know where the sounds originate, and I listen very close to that. But long story short, I guess it can depend on the scenario. Sometimes you can save time by just recording the sound as it is, but sometimes it's easier to fake it in post, I guess.
Valentino, do you have anything to add to that one?
No, I mean, I'm not sure if Mesa, sorry about the pronunciation, was referring to some technical actual implementation on stage and so on. But yeah, instead I had this, I don't know, this flash in my mind of using very directional speakers if you have an audience there in your room, or if you're streaming it as well. I mean, as Martin said, it's very much an artistic choice. It's not very much on a technical one, I guess. It comes down to how much realistic you want to be, and what kind of sense of immersions you want to give to the viewer, and so on. So yeah, there is no right or wrong solution, I bet. It's just more of an artistic choice there. That's my feeling, yeah.
Yeah, and most of the time a question, like in the real world, a term of a question of budget. Like one example is I had a scene that I recorded inside of a car, and it immediately sounded like a car. But if you do it in a studio, it's way easier to set everything up. You just have your actors come in and record everything, and then fake it to sound like a car. But it doesn't really cut it for me most of the time. So it really depends on how much time you have and like what the director allows you to do, I guess.
I think it's a very interesting, especially with the topic of this presentation, it highlights that VP stages are very much visual driven entities. It's a very visual driven technology. And I think at the moment, the way that the workflows currently exist, the acoustic environment is just so poor from a recording point of view, as Martin highlighted. It would be more dangerous probably to record anything. You're not going to use much of what you capture in situ, but hopefully that's going to change in the future. And put a pin in that because I'll mention it again later. In terms of virtual production, but for now, yes, I think it's one of the big limitations of virtual production if we're using a VP stage. And as you highlight, Martin, there's something about the authenticity of the sound, I guess. We might put it. That's a dangerous word to use in this environment, but there we go. I used it. Okay, you're welcome. Okay, I don't see any more questions in the chat. John, shake your head at me if I'm doing this wrong, if there's anywhere I've missed.
No, all the questions answered.
Okay, well, in that case, I want to just say a big thank you again to Martin and Valentino for that really inspiring presentation. There's clearly a lot to be done in terms of how we improve these workflows to make that really valuable work easier to do and more accessible for more sound designers, to incorporate sound design across these different kind of visual elements. So thank you very much. Really appreciate it. And I'm going to segue seamlessly, especially from that last question, into, and I can't remember what you called it, John. Hang on, bear with me. She says, segue seamlessly.
It's the XR Magical Tour Bus.
It's the magical tour bus. That's what I'm doing. That's what I'm doing here. Bear with me. So let's share my sound. And can we see that? Can you hear me? It's all going well so far, isn't it? So this is the XR Magical Tour Bus. Don't be put off by that's not what it says on this slide, because that is definitely what's happening here. I wanted to capitalize on the fact that we have a presentation that has a really refreshing focus on sound. Because as we mentioned from that last question, certainly virtual production, a lot of the technology and a lot of the focus is on visuals. And we have to, all of us people that work in audio have to accept, apparently, that we are visual beings generally. Humans are visual, and our visual perception will override our sound perception. Okay, so we do understand where that comes from. But I wanted to take this new focus that we have on sound, which has been done really well for a very visual medium. So Bernardino and Martin really highlighted well the fact that we're used to not focusing on sound in a 360 video environment. We really focus on what we can see, and we want what we can hear to represent that in a certain way, but we can affect things creatively. I'm going to be much more obvious in sound. So I've decided to focus what I talk about for the next 10 minutes or so on music, because I think it's much easier for us to grasp how important sound is when we think about music. But I promise not to forget about visuals entirely. So what I thought I would do is just give a few examples of some of the projects that have taken place over the last couple of years, especially in and around the audio lab at York and elsewhere at the university. There's a whole kind of collaboration of numerous people, PhD students, PDRAs, lecturers from across the university that have collaborated in this work, as well as different companies. So this is by no means one person's work, but I thought I'd give just a little snapshot of some different projects and how they take the balance of sound and vision in different ways to focus on development of either a technology or our understanding of those connections and how that can then be embedded in technology. And I will bring all of that back to virtual production and the fact that lots of these projects are using virtual production techniques, but there's a mismatch, which we've just identified in that last question, of how do we actually integrate what we know about sound and audio for the future of virtual production across various different applications. So that's my kind of apology that I'm going to talk about music for the next 10 minutes, really. But I'm going to start off with a visual just to show you that I've not forgotten about vision entirely. And this is a collection of projects that we've been doing with the BBC around Maida Vale Studios. So the BBC Maida Vale Studios. And what you can see in front of you on my left-hand side, don't know if it's your left or right, there's a photograph of a music studio. And that is MV4, which is where the John Peel Live Lounge sessions used to take place. And indeed, Radio 1 Live Lounge sessions still take place, Radio 2 Live Lounge sessions still take place in MV4. So it's quite an iconic music studio. All big artists want to perform there. They want to do a live lounge session. And we were interested in, okay, can we recreate it virtually? And so on the other side of your screen, my right, you can see our Unity representation of that same studio. So we've created a visual representation in VR that you can look around. But of course, this is about sound. It's about making music. So we also measured the space. So from an acoustic point of view, so we took the acoustic fingerprint of that space so that we could make sure that in the VR environment, it sounds like you're really there. You're actually playing in Maida Vale 3. And then what we wanted to do was enable people to perform in Maida Vale Studio 4 without all being together. So they could all be in VR in different places, and we network them together over the internet and they can perform together. So that's one of our projects. Lots of issues there, not least latency. I'm not going to go into how we deal with that at the moment, but needless to say, we have a solution that allowed our performers to perform together with a very small delay between the performers. And what we were interested in was, could we make it sound realistic, as if they were actually in the studio? So we employed a band called Wolf, a rock band. We brought them to Maida Vale and they cut a track as if it was a live lounge session. And then we brought them back to the audio lab. And you can see here on this slide, we've got all our musicians with VR headsets and headphones on. And what they're doing is they are performing together at Maida Vale, as though they are in the studio. And I'm going to play you, I really hope this works. This is the drummer at the audio lab. Could you hear that? Ish, quite quiet. I don't know if it's quiet for you. So that's the drummer. He's performing with all those other musicians, and this is what it sounded like to them. And this is the track that they cut in VR at Maida Vale.
Run wild through corridors, taking what's mine back, leaving behind what's yours. Lights off, can't see, no love in front of me to figure it out for you. But baby, it's a long way down, and it's cold outside. You're bound to lose your breath, standing on shoulders of giants.
So it worked. They managed to perform together. Okay, so they made comments like, it's like we're actually back there again. It's amazing. I can turn my head to the avatar of the other musician. Just quickly, the avatars that they were performing with did not look like in this picture. I should point that out. So when we're dealing in real time with real-time duplex interaction between musicians, they have much simpler avatar representation because the issues of rendering in real time and trying to minimize the delay. So they can't see beautiful avatars of themselves. They've got quite simplistic representation. And then they have a pass-through in VR so they can see their instrument. But they loved it. Now, what we can do in post, especially now we have technologies like mocap, we can then make it look beautiful and sound beautiful. So what we have here is we've taken our twin of Maida Vale and the work of some of the technicians at XR Stories and in the Audio Lab. They've in post applied virtual production techniques to then explore the different sound formats that you might use. So if you went to the Audio Lab website, we've now got resources where you can have a listen to some different audio formats, test them out, see what you think. But how do we maximize these technologies to make it as immersive, duplex as possible? And there's certain things that we can do in post, or indeed, if we're thinking in terms of virtual production workflows, where we can get things looking fabulous, sounding fabulous, but they don't yet work in real time because there's too much going on computationally. But these are the sorts of things that we can now do. They sound fantastic and they're starting to look fantastic as well. I'm going to say something controversial again, which is that in terms of sound, we can do some incredible things that look and sound very realistic in terms of immersive environments when we want 360 sound that we can interact with our environment. what lets us down still is the kind of realism of our visual environment. And what we're finding with musicians is that doesn't really matter to a great degree, because what they rely on is the sound. But it's certainly the visuals that let us know always that we're in a virtual environment. And on that, so this is a different project, not with the BBC, but with a startup called Bonza Music, who were interested in could we create some music education situations where people aren't in the room together. So could you have real superstars from the music industry teach students, which is something that they want to do, but they don't have the time to go around schools, etc. So we set up a system for them. You can see on this screen, that's Jamie Cullum sat at a piano, and then he has two screens that he's looking at. On the screen on his left, he has a school band that are in a school in Reading, and on his right-hand side, there's a school that are in Suffolk, the far end of Suffolk, and Jamie is in Milton Keynes. So we have a triangle of distance of about 350 miles, and we provided them with a system that allowed them to hear each other, to perform together in real time, hearing each other, positioned as if they're in the room together where they see each other in the screen, but also they could choose whether the acoustic was where Jamie was in a studio, or they could put Jamie in the room with them. So we measured each of the rooms and they could choose these different situations. And Jamie ran an improvisation masterclass in real time with them all gigging together with binaural audio. So everyone, you can just about make out that all the musicians have got headphones on. But we have video realistic visuals, but they are flat screen and they're hugely delayed compared to the audio. So the audio, they could perform together, but they really couldn't look at each other while they were performing, because that was a limitation of the technology at the time. It may be that VP technology can move us forward in terms of how we get visuals into this sort of system. And that brings me to just ignoring the visuals altogether. So what I've done, I've gone from, look, we can make it look really good, to, but actually it's really hard. And a lot of the focus of what we want to be able to do with music is to be able to have real-time interaction, a little bit like with the virtual production workflows for film, where we have to add the audio on afterwards. That's no good if we're interested in the music. It's all about the sound you're making in the moment. And that brings me to a project that we are currently undertaking called Sapphire. And this was the first output from that project, where we thought, okay, we've had musicians performing in a virtual acoustic, interacting with head tracked audio, where each person is isolated. What we want to be able to do is have a professional level concert with a distributed ensemble. What I mean by that is we've got a vocal octet. 4 of that octet are in the hall you can see on this picture. So you can just about make out we've got an audience, and to the stage left, we have 4 singers stood like a vocal quartet. Stage right, we have 4 Genelec loudspeakers. Each of those loudspeakers represents another singer that was in York. So the hall you can see in front of you is in Huddersfield. And what we wanted to do, and you can see there's a real live audience, so they are in the Phipps Hall at Huddersfield University. We wanted a live concert where half of the ensemble were not present, but they're all singing in real time. And they are all singing in the acoustic of the BBC Singers Studio down at BBC Maida Vale. And the audience are hearing the concert. So you can just about make out an awful lot of loudspeakers. So it's a treated hall designed for electroacoustic music. So it's got a surround sound system in it for ambisonics. And so everyone is listening to the concert in the BBC studio for the BBC singers. So it was quite stressful, that one, but it worked. So these are the singers in York that you can see. They're just in a studio in York. they can hear each other. So they've got open back headphones on. They can hear each other in the room through air propagation. But then they've got a digital signal of the singers from Huddersfield that they can hear as well. And this is what they sound like if we listen to them locally. Okay, so they sound like a quartet singing in a studio. They cannot see the singers in Huddersfield at all. Okay, so they are relying entirely on what they can hear. This is what it sounded like, different piece, but this is what it sounded like in Huddersfield. So it worked. 45-minute concert, and they performed together. But they can't see each other. Okay, and so there is absolutely no doubt that if we could now, let's go back to the presentation from before, have some of those 360 visuals back from those videos, that we could get those cues, that would enhance the feeling that they were actually in a room with the other 4 singers. The next step for the Sapphire project, and this is a big plug. Sorry, John, you didn't say it was a plug session, but this is a plug. On the 21st of May, we will be putting on an event with the BBC singers where you can join them and you can sing with them in BBC Maida Vale Studio 2 by joining over an app that we're designing that allows you to join in, sing with them, and it will record your contribution, and then that becomes part of the BBC centenary concert performed live at the Barbican in October this year. So what we've taken away with this is no longer a duplex model, but it still allows people to embrace the immersive virtual acoustics of Maida Vale 2, and you are situated, you can see the binaural heads there, so you will be situated as if within the choir. And that leads me to, that's part of the CoStar project. I hope I've highlighted that audio is important, sound's important, and without our understanding of 360 audio, ambisonics, binaural, the importance of head tracking, the importance of what we see and what we hear, which there's still this mismatch here, and the virtual production techniques, especially virtual production stages, we mentioned in the Q&A, that they're a big problem as to how do we capture that audio. If we come at it from the other side, and certainly in a duplex models that we're looking at, we then lose the visuals. So how do we move forward and put all these technologies together? And that brings me to this big initiative called CoStar, and CoStar Live Lab. Live Lab is being led by the University of York, will be based in Wakefield at Production Park. And the point of CoStar is a £75 million investment from UKRI to fund 5 labs, which bring together different expertise and industry around the convergent. Oh, go on, John, what does it stand for? Hang on a second, I know this. Convergent screen technologies and performance in real time. Yeah, there we go. That's what it is. But it's around convergence. It's convergence of these technologies, gaming technologies, live performance technologies, VP technologies that are traditionally used for film, for instance, bringing them together to really develop and ensure that the UK is at the forefront of development for the creative industries moving forward. And so we have a national lab based at Pinewood, being led by Royal Holloway, the real-time lab up at Abertay, Screen Lab at Ulster, and Live Lab in Wakefield, led by the University of York, and then a 4-site lab led by Goldsmiths, looking forward to where we should be generating interest and focusing our ideas for the future of the creative industries. So that's a very rapid, let's not forget about sound when we're dealing with XR, because it's hugely, hugely important. And do look out for opportunities that will be coming up, and I'm sure we'll be distributing them through XR Network Plus, John, and advertising opportunities as they arise through CoStar. Thank you. That's the magical tour bus, John. I hope that's what you expected.
Oh, that was great, Helena. Thank you so much, and thank you for sharing the talk as well. Thank you, Martin and Blandino as well. I'm just going to very quickly do my parish notices. First off, if you enjoyed listening about sound and sound design in VP, there is an episode of the XR Stories podcast about it. So find us however you find your podcast, search for XR Stories, and it's series 2, episode 3. And it's, really good, and there's more perspectives in there as well, so it's really nice to hear even more people thinking about sound there. There's a funding announcement, so our R&D project funding round 2, so the project you heard about today was one of the projects from our round 1. Round 2 funding opens on the 1st of May 2024, so keep an eye out for that. Sign up to our mailing list if you're not, and you'll get it in your inbox as soon as it arrives, or mark it in your diary and come back and check our website. The next seminar will be on the 15th of May, same time, 2 till 3:15. We're just confirming the speakers and the subject for that seminar, but mark it in your diary anyway, because you had such a lovely time today. And that's it. So once again, thanks again to our amazing speakers for their time and thoughts. Thank you for your questions, audience, and thank you everybody who didn't ask a question but listened really well. And hopefully we'll see you all next time. Okay, thank you.